Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. Shortly before his arrest in 2020, Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai was defiant.
I can't be scared. If I'm scared, what can I do? I cannot say anything. I cannot do anything. Because the most skillful thing that the CCP can do is to induce fear in you, to subdue you.
Jimmy Lai is one of the most high-profile critics of Beijing and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. He was arrested under Hong Kong's controversial national security law created in response to pro-democracy protests in 2019. On Monday, Jimmy Lai was found guilty under that law on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit collusion with foreign forces and 1 count of conspiracy to commit sedition. Jimmy Lai has spent almost 5 years in a maximum security prison. He now faces life in jail. Sebastien Lai is Jimmy Lai's son. Sebastien, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
What do you know about how your father is doing right now?
Unfortunately, his health has deteriorated a lot, and it keeps deteriorating rapidly. He's 78 now and has spent the last 5 years in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison where temperatures can routinely go up above 30 degrees. So essentially he's baking in his cell, and he now has heart issues as a result. He's lost 10 kilos in the last year alone. His body, his teeth are rotting, his fingernails are falling off. We're incredibly worried about him. His treatment has been unnecessarily cruel.
When was the last time you saw him?
Last time I saw him was at the end of 2020, because I advocate on his behalf. It's not safe for me to return to Hong Kong, so I haven't seen my father in 5 years.
And have you spoken to him since then, or?
No, he doesn't get phone calls, so I haven't been able to hear his voice in 5 years.
What is that like for you?
It's obviously it's tough, but I think what is even tougher is seeing this man who who stood up for all the freedoms that matter in the free world, the freedoms that unite us, being treated like this, being treated like he's a criminal. And essentially being tortured in prison. It's heartbreaking. Every day, I campaign. He remains in jail. It's incredibly heartbreaking.
For people who may not be as familiar as we are with his story, can you just briefly tell us his background? How did he end up building a life in Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure. So he escaped from communist China by himself when he was 12, and then became very successful in business. But after the Tiananmen Square massacre, he knew that he had to do something to protect the rights and freedoms of Hong Kong that gave him so much. So he decided to open a newspaper with the belief that information is choice and choice is freedom. So Apple Daily, his newspaper, which subsequently became the biggest newspaper in Hong Kong, was going to tell truth to power and wasn't going to bend the knee to the powerful, to the government, and was going to advocate for for democracy and more freedom in Hong Kong. He and his journalists did that for 25 years. And were always a thorn on the government's side, as a good journalist, as a good newspaper should be. And then they passed the national security law. And with the national security law, because it's so draconic and so broad, they arrested my father. They sent 200 police officers to raid the newsrooms of Apple Daily. And then when the journalists and the staff there refused to close, they sent another 500 police officer and closed Apple Daily. So when Hong Kong tells you they have the free press. If you just type in Apple Daily raids, that is what free press looks like in Hong Kong.
What did you learn from him as you were growing up? What did you learn about why he had taken that stance? He was a billionaire. He built this fashion empire. He could have done any number of things, but threw himself into this. What did he tell you about why this was important to him?
I think in some sense I was quite lucky because of what my father stood for, because because he stood for freedom, for liberty, for the free press. These are values that I think most people inherently understand. So he never had to tell me how important it was. I think it was more his dedication to it. And I realized that my father, his whole life, has been chasing freedom. He reached Hong Kong, which was relatively free after escaping communist China. So he knew the cost and the importance of it. But I think what is incredible and so incredibly moving is his dedication and his decision to dedicate so much of his life, so much of his resource to defend these freedoms. And when his life was being threatened, when the national security law passed and everybody told him to leave, and at 72 he could have left and had a very comfortable life outside. As he says, if I in an interview, he said, if I leave, I live comfortably, but if I stay, I live meaningfully. And so he stayed. He stood by his journalists. He stood by other protesters, and decided to defend his values, and defend all these people, and act as a lightning rod for the persecution that was to come.
Do you understand that decision that he made? Again, he's now in this incredibly precarious situation. But do you understand why he made that decision?
I think there's when he was, because he was in and out of prison at the end of 2020 until New Year's Eve when he was arrested for good. Someone asked him, look, Jimmy, the first time he was arrested, he went out. They asked him, look, Jimmy, knowing that this is what it's come to, do you regret what you've done? And he says, when I was lying in the detention cell, they gave you this little blanket, so I couldn't sleep all night because it was so cold. And I thought back about the last 30 years. And I thought to myself, what would I change? And then I realized I wouldn't have changed a damn thing. I mean, this is a man who knows what is right, who understands his principles, understands his responsibilities, and did the right thing. I think this is a perfect example of a person doing the right thing at every turn, and you can't control what other people do to you. In this case, arresting him, putting him through the show trial, and essentially torturing him. You can't control that, but you can control what you do, and for him, and for me, and for many people around the world, Jimmy Lai has stood by his values. He's stood by his values, stood by his people, and stood by the rights of freedoms that so many people fought and built.
You live in the UK now, but you grew up in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong has gone through tumultuous change over the last several years. How do people there now feel about the pressure from Beijing in their day-to-day lives? What does that look like in terms of the influence of Beijing?
Yeah, I think, Hong Kong had gone from a place that had a lot of freedom. Obviously, one country, two system belonged to China, but had a lot of freedom. Mm-hmm. It didn't have democracy, but had a lot of freedom. To a place now that doesn't have free press, doesn't have freedom of speech, doesn't have the rule of law, and it's been weaponized against people like my father and other pro-democracy protesters. There's a lot of these little things you can see. For example, we used to be able to go in Hong Kong to Tiananmen Square vigils to commemorate the people who died in Tiananmen Square. You can no longer do that. In the last 5 years, that right has been removed. In fact, my father got 13 months. One of his sentences was 13 months for lighting a candle and saying a prayer to all the students who got ran over, who got killed in Tiananmen Square. So that's what Hong Kong is now. It's arbitrary arrests. It's cruel treatments of people like my father. I think most people vote with their feet. A lot of people have left, and a lot of businesses, a lot of newspapers also have left.
Do you think the pro-democracy movement that your father was so instrumental in, is it dead now?
I think in the end of the day, these values, the movement is values. It's values of a belief of human dignity and a belief of human rights. And that's not something that can disappear within a person. It's an idea. And I think obviously I have no idea about the prediction of the future of Hong Kong. Yeah. But these values are fundamental, and I don't think they disappear in people.
There are nations that are trying to figure out, including Canada, trying to figure out what their relationship with China will look like in future. The United States is one of those nations, and the U.S. President Donald Trump has spoken with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Trump said that he asked Xi to consider releasing your father. What do you make of that?
We're so incredibly grateful for the president. It gives our family so much hope, and we're so, just bottom of my heart, so incredibly grateful. And obviously, we've had so much support in Canada as well, including a unanimous consent motion passed by the Parliament, which stated, here's a man, and I'm paraphrasing, here's a man who represents all the good of Canadian values. Of the Canadian democracy, and that's why, as a parliament, we must stand behind him. And I think that's resounding support. And I hope that next time Prime Minister Carney sees Xi Jinping, that my father's case is also mentioned. Seeing that in an interview, he said that obviously my father should be released, and you would have seen the G7 statement recently, I think a day ago, where all the G7 foreign ministers agreed to what called for my father's release and to end this cruel persecution.
Do you worry that those pushes could face some pushback if those nations are trying to figure out an economic deal, for example, with China?
No, I don't think there's any. The two things aren't. It's not just because you stand up for human rights. It's not just because you stand up for human decency that China won't trade with you. I mean, they'll still buy the same. They'll still buy the stuff that they want to buy and sell you the stuff that they want to sell. This idea that the democratic countries can't defend their own values is just because they want to trade with the country. It's completely misguided. Not only should that not be something they do, but that is not something that is based on any type of reality either. Again, countries don't trade out of the goodness of their hearts. Countries trade because they want to buy something from another country, and vice versa. And that's the basis of that. So, in fact, it gives us all the more reason to stand up for the rights that you believe in. Because if you don't stand up for these fundamental rights, when they are so clearly being violated in my father's case, then all these authoritarian regimes know that they have you. They have you in their pocket. That's never a position any country wants to be in.
If you could speak to your father now, what would you say to him? Well, that I'm very proud of him. I love him. I'm very proud of him, and I'll keep working until I see him again. Sebastien, I'm glad to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good day. Sebastien Lai is the son of the pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai. Jimmy Lai was found guilty this week under Hong Kong's national security law. He is facing life in prison. Lynette Ong is a distinguished professor of Chinese politics at the University of Toronto, author of Outsourcing Repression, Everyday State Power in Contemporary China. Lynette, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
How likely is it that China's mind can be changed when it comes to the fate of Jimmy Lai?
Well, we hope that, the Hong Kong government as well as the Chinese government will think about kind of the bigger picture, not just in terms of this particular case. I think at this point in time, they gain no further by prosecuting him, by sentencing him to life imprisonment. But they would gain in terms of publicity, PR, that, if you release him since he's already so old, there's really nothing that he can do in terms of furthering, democracy or freedom that he used to do. But again, I think the government will gain a lot of goodwill by doing that.
What about the opposite? If Jimmy Lai is not released, if he dies in prison, what would that mean? China is a nation that in some ways, and we can talk more about how Canada is engaging with China, but China is also engaging with the world. And what would that mean for China's reputation?
Yeah, I think it would look, it really wouldn't look good on either the Chinese or the Hong Kong government. I think, the last high-profile case of this sort was the death of Liu Xiaobo, just before COVID. I think at that time, China was at a different phase of geopolitics and its economic trajectory. I think now the economy is so much weaker than before, and there's so much geopolitical tension between China with the United States, but not only with the United States, but also with a lot of Western nations. I think it is in China's interest to project a good image and try to show the world that what it can actually potentially do in order to prop up its own status in the world.
Anita Anand, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, posted on social media this week, Canada condemns the politically motivated prosecution of Jimmy Lai under the national security law in Hong Kong. She posted that, and this conversation comes at a time, as we've said, when China is, it seems like, receptive to efforts by Canada to normalize relations and diversify trade and create sort of a new pathway forward. How should the Canadian government, given that context, how should the Canadian government respond here, do you think?
I think we know that, the relations between Canada and China has not been smooth sailing for the last 8-10 years or so. And we should go in with the mindset that this is going to be a difficult relations, but Canada is at a point in history that we think it is necessary to engage, to trade with China, whatever terms or adjectives or verbs that we want to use. But we have to look to China and work with China in some ways. But we also know that this is not going to be a smooth sailing relationship. So I think Minister Anand, by bringing up this case, she has done the right thing, meaning that we do have constraints, and these are our concerns, and these are things that are important to us. In spite of all that, we are still willing to work with you. I think by sending that sort of message, we will gain respect from China, right? Because we are not going in by trading off all those things that are important to us. We do want to stress that this is one of those things that are on our mind, and we think his release is important to furthering the relations.
There is this hope in some circles that opening up trade with China might make that nation more open to Western values like democracy and human rights. I dare say that we heard that in 2008 around the Olympics, when the Olympics went to China, that people thought this would open China up, and we saw what happened. What do you make of that argument?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a political scientist. That is a pipe dream in modernization theory. But if we were to take kind of a greater, a longer view of history, Chinese people has gained so much economic freedom over the years, and a lot of them have been able to say and do what they do because of economic prosperity. Either in China or outside China. But a lot of them, the sheer size of Chinese diaspora, not only in Canada, United States, in UK, have been able to do what they could not imagine just a generation ago. And those people, a lot of them are actually doing what they can to try to bring freedom among the community, but also they are trying, eventually back to China. So I think we are not at the end of history. So it might be kind of wrong thinking at the time, like the United States and Western countries have tried to bring China into the WTO, the World Trade Organization, thinking that free trade will bring prosperity and eventually political freedom in China. But if we take a longer view of history, I think we are not at the end of it yet. So we might not want to lose hope at this point in time.
Lynette Ong, we'll leave it there. It's good to speak with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lynette Ong is a distinguished professor of Chinese politics at the University of Toronto, author of Outsourcing Repression, Everyday State Power in Contemporary China. She was in Toronto. You've been listening to The Current Podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.